Funding for stress-free cooking is brought to you by Cutco. Cutco has been making high-quality products in Olean, New York since 1949. Cutco's straight-edge blades are durable, flexible, and hold a razor-sharp edge. And by Melissa's. Established in 1984, Melissa's World Variety Produce is currently the largest distributor of specialty produce in the United States. You could depend on Melissa's for delivering great quality products in fruits and vegetables.
Hi, I'm Barbara Seelig-Brown. Welcome to Stress-Free Cooking. What I want you to do is come home from work, put on your bunny slippers, pour a glass of wine, and cook with me. Hi, I'm Barbara Seelig-Brown. Welcome to Stress-Free Cooking. What I want you to do is come home from work, put on your bunny slippers, and pour a glass of wine and cook a great meal with me. So let's get started. Today what we're going to cook are some great dishes that you can make, one in the morning and leave in your crock pot all day so that when you come home from work the house smells terrific. And the second dish is a really quick, sort of in the pan, top of the stove, really quick chicken dish that you can make on a moment's notice. So let's get started with our pork dish. The pork dish is the one that you're going to cook all day in the crock pot. So we always want to get everything ready. So this dish needs a couple of cloves of garlic. So I'm going to crush my garlic. Before I turn on the pan, I want to make sure everything's chopped and ready to go. So put your chef's knife on top of the garlic, take the other hand, give it a good whack, and do the same thing with the second clove. The skin comes right off, and then they're ready to be chopped a little bit finer. And let's get that skin off. You know, garlic's a little sticky, so sometimes you have to work at this just a little bit. Okay, that should be good. All right, so now I'm just gonna take my chef's knife and just finely chop this garlic really quick. You can buy peeled and chopped garlic if you want to, but remember that whenever you buy anything that's already peeled or chopped, you're gonna lose a little flavor, and if it's a vegetable, a little nutritional value. So I also want some onion in this dish. And in this dish, I can use a roughly chopped onion because I really want this to be visible in the dish. So let's just quarter this onion and take the skin off. That comes off nice and easy. And then just make nice big chunks and have them ready to go in the pan. Okay, and one little piece of skin sticking to this, but we'll get rid of that. Okay, so cut it in half, cut it in quarters. And again, you want the onions to be fairly large because when we are finished cooking this dish, we do want to see that they're there. Okay, and one more time. Okay, so now we have onions and garlic all set. The other ingredients that we're going to use in this dish are chickpeas and white beans. Whenever you use anything out of a can, you want to drain it and rinse it really well. Get rid of any preservatives or any seasonings that they've put in the can because you want to season the dish yourself. I also have some crushed tomatoes here. And you could use fresh chopped tomatoes, you could use a can of crushed tomatoes, whatever you happen to have in your pantry, but make sure you keep these in your pantry. I also have salt and pepper that I've mixed together. So it's going to be a little shortcut. Instead of seasoning the dish once with salt and a second time with pepper, I have it mixed together and just in this little bowl on the side. The main ingredient for the dish are country-style pork ribs. These are nice and meaty. They're gonna cook up very, very tender, but they do take a long time to cook. That's why we're using the crock pot. Or if you're gonna be home, you're gonna prepare the dish in this pan, put a lid on it, and put it in the oven for about 2 hours. And one last thing I have for this dish is some beef stock. So let's get started. And I'm gonna put a little extra virgin olive oil on the bottom of my pan. This is called a covered casserole. You could call this a sauteuse. Any pan that could go into the oven would work. So let's heat up the oil a little bit, and then I'm gonna add my ribs. And these do have bones. Sometimes you'll see them in the store without the bones, that's fine too, but everything is always a little bit more flavorful when you have the bones. So once you get that meat in the pan, make sure that you wash your hands so you're not transferring any of those germs. Now that my hands are clean, I can season this. So I'm just gonna take my salt and pepper and just sprinkle a little bit over the meat. And then I'll rub it in a little bit. And when the first side is browned, I'm gonna turn this over. And while I'm browning the second side, I'm gonna add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so you give that a couple minutes, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, let that brown nicely. You don't wanna turn your meat of any kind, whether it's on the grill or in a frying pan or a saute pan, until it allows you to turn it. So if it's sticking a little bit, it's not ready. You want to wait for nice caramelization, which will allow you to turn it. So I know I need a little bit more time on this. So we'll give that a couple minutes and then we will turn it when it's ready. Okay, just another couple of minutes. Now we used extra virgin olive oil in here, just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. It's usually about 1 to 2 tablespoons, depends on the size of the pan, but it's really not necessary to measure it. All you need to do is just let it coat the bottom of the pan, and as the pan heats up, it will spread out a little bit more, so don't overdo it. Alrighty, I think our pork is ready to be turned. Oh yes, nice and brown. So we're gonna give it a good turn. I'll season it one more time, add the rest of the ingredients. And while the second side is browning, the onions and the garlic will be cooking. We'll give that a couple of minutes, and then this is going to go into the oven or the crock pot, whatever is going to work for you that day. Okay, so let's season this again. A little salt and pepper mixture. Okay, and add the onions. And try and add the onions and the garlic to the surface of the pan, not on top of the meat, so that it does saute a little bit. It'll also release those flavors for you. Okay, and then the garlic. Okay, and make sure you get the garlic on the pan surface as well. If the garlic and the onions sit on top of the meat, nothing's really gonna happen to them. Once you start to really smell these ingredients cooking, you can add your beans, your stock, and your tomatoes, and it'll be ready to go. Okay, so I smell my garlic and add my beans. I like to add the beans to this dish. It just rounds it out a little bit. Another way you could serve it would be to serve it over some polenta, would be a nice complement to this. Okay, I'm gonna add the stock first so I deglaze the bottom of the pan while it's nice and hot. And you can hear that sizzle and you know that it's lifting up all that wonderful good stuff that's on the bottom of the pan, which is also giving us lots and lots of flavor. So crushed tomatoes. And I do want to make sure I get this nice and hot before I put it in my crock pot or before I put it into the oven. And if I'm putting it in the oven, I'm going to put it in the oven at about 300 degrees covered for about 2 hours, or I'm going to cook it in my crock pot on high for 4 hours or on low for 8 hours. So if you have to go out for a full day of work, you can cook it on low, and when you come home, the house will smell nice. I always think it's so wonderful if the cook comes home and the house smells nice, because if you're the cook, you're always cooking, and when others come home, it smells great. So crock pot allows you to come home to a great smell. So let's get that into the oven and we'll go on to the next dish. Let's talk about chicken. Chicken breast is like the little black dress of the kitchen. You can do so much with it. I'm going to prepare this today with asparagus, but you can put any vegetables that you want in here. So once again, we're going to start with a little extra virgin olive oil in the bottom of the pan. You can also use canola oil if you want. Canola has no flavor. I like the flavor of extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil and canola oil are your best choices for the kitchen. They're heart healthy and they have no saturated fat. So we're going to crush our garlic. Once again, the chef's knife on top of the garlic. And give it a nice little whack. Okay, and this garlic. Doesn't have to be as finely minced as the other because this will end up melting away in the sauce of this chicken dish. So into the pan we go. And we're just gonna let this cook for a second while we dredge our chicken. So I have 2 boneless, skinless chicken breasts. A portion size is usually about 4 ounces. These are probably about 6 ounces each, so you might want to share part of this with your partner. But you're going to just dip it into some granulated flour. It's a very light flour, or it's also called pan searing flour. Okay. And then you're going to put this in your pan, skin side down, which is the smoother side. If you take a look at my chicken breast, you can see that it has a smooth side, and it has the side that was against the ribs. So we're going to put the skin side down in the pan. And if you keep your chicken breasts in your freezer individually wrapped, all you have to do is take them out and just get them defrosted a little bit before you do this. So this dish can be really, really spur of the moment. I always freeze my chicken breast individually so that it's much easier for me to take a portion out. Okay? So let that brown. Let me just get rid of these, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now while our chicken is browning, I'm going to chop up some parsley. Grab another chef's knife. Now, parsley is one of those herbs that you can use the stems. There's actually more flavor in the stem of the parsley than in the leaves. And I'm using the flat Italian parsley as opposed to the curly. The flat Italian parsley also has more flavor than the curly. Curly parsley used to be used as a breath freshener at the turn of the century. It's a nice garnish to put on a plate, but for cooking, you want the flat Italian. So we're going to have a nice little bit of parsley in here, about a ½ cup. Whoops. Now I like to roughly chop my herbs so that you do see them when they're in the dish. While the chicken's cooking, I'm going to sprinkle a little salt and pepper over it. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about asparagus while our chicken is finishing to brown. All you need to do when you have fresh asparagus is take the spear and just bend it. And wherever the asparagus breaks is the right place to trim it. When you're purchasing asparagus, you want to look for nice tight spears. You want the ends to be dry, the top end to be dry and compact. And you want the bottom to be sitting in water. A good store will have them sitting in some water, standing up in a little bit of ice or water so that they don't dry out. And you want to check and make sure that they're not woody on the bottom. And the size or thickness of an asparagus spear does not mean that it's old or shouldn't be purchased. It just means that it came from an older plant. But that's okay. Asparagus takes many years to really form a nice spear. All right, let's turn the chicken over. So we have nice browning here, and our garlic is nicely browned. And before the garlic gets cooked anymore, I'm going to add a splash of white wine to the pan. And that white wine is going to pick up all the bits of garlic that are on the bottom and make a really nice sauce for us. So now that the white wine is in there, I'll add my chicken stock. And my asparagus right on top of the chicken. Sprinkle it with the parsley. This is going to get covered, and we're going to cook this for about 8 to 12 minutes, depending on the thickness of the chicken breast. Okay, and that's all there is to it. So now you could go sit down, relax, have a glass of wine, or make a salad to go with this. Let's let this cook for a little bit, and we'll be back to make just one more dish. The next dish that I'd like to prepare is one that a friend of mine made for me a while back. It was one of his mother's favorite things to make, and it uses leftover spaghetti. So I'm going to start out with some garlic. So we crush the garlic with the side of the chef's knife. And we're going to pop this garlic into the pan. Okay, now this garlic I do want fairly well minced because I don't want any chunks of garlic in this dish. So I'm going to take the side of my chef's knife and some of my salt and pepper and crush it into the garlic so that it gets a little bit pasty. And that way no one will get a chunk of garlic in their frittata. Alrighty, so that's ready to go. So I'm going to put that in my pan. I'm using a non-stick pan for this dish. And I'm going to add some extra virgin olive oil, just a touch, because I am using a non-stick pan, but I do want that garlic to cook well. So we'll toss that around a little bit. I'm using a silicone spatula. They can withstand heat of up to about 550 degrees, so you don't have to worry. Okay, so we're mixing that garlic well with the oil. And while that's cooking, what I want to do is I want to chop up some tomatoes. So I have some nice ripe tomatoes. I'm going to cut them up and pop them into a bowl, and then I'll be putting a little salt and pepper on these to bring the juices out of the tomatoes. So I have a nice variety of tomatoes. I really like using different colors and different textures in a dish whenever I can. We have the little green zebra striped tomatoes. I have some Campari tomatoes. That's what the little bit larger ones are. And then I have some yellow grape tomatoes. These are also nice to use if you just want to make a bruschetta topping. If you just chop up your tomatoes with a little garlic and basil and put a little salt and pepper on them, add a little splash of extra virgin olive oil, you get a great bruschetta topping. But remember, the bruschetta is the bread, not the topping. I get very frustrated when I'm in the grocery store and I see a container of tomatoes called bruschetta. They are not the bruschetta, they are the topping. Okay, let's add a little salt and pepper to this. Okay. Now remember, this is a combination of salt and finely ground black pepper, so it's not as much salt as it looks. All right, and this just had olive oil on it, so we're gonna toss this with our spatula. Okay. And let those sit for just a second so we get some nice juice out of them. So let's grab some of this leftover cooked spaghetti. And of course, we don't need all of this, so I'm just gonna put enough in the bottom of the pan that I get a nice layer. Okay. And you can hear that nice sizzle, so it'll heat up the spaghetti. Okay. Good. Now we could make several frittatas with this amount of spaghetti. All right, so we're done with that. Now let's scramble some eggs. Okay, but actually, before we scramble the eggs, what I want to do is I want to add my tomatoes to the dish. So you can see they've become a little bit juicy from the salt and pepper. So we're just going to pour these right into the dish. Okay, this will warm up the tomatoes. A little bit more juice will come out of them. Okay. And now we can talk about eggs. So I have 8 eggs here. And what I wanted to show you was that when you crack your egg, you're going to crack it on a flat surface. You don't crack the egg on the side of the bowl. It puts your shell back into the egg. So crack it on a flat surface and just pry the shell apart with your fingers. Then use a whisk to scramble these. And the whisk will also help to lighten them up a little bit. We really don't need to season the eggs too much because I've already seasoned the pan with the garlic and the extra virgin olive oil. The tomatoes are seasoned with the salt and pepper. And I'm going to add one last thing to this dish. I'm going to add a good helping of Grana Padano cheese. But I want to freshly grate my cheese. So before I add the eggs, let me grab my grater and my cheese. And I'm going to use this old-fashioned hand-cranked grater. It makes very quick work of grating cheese. If you grate your cheese when you're using it, you'll save a lot of flavor and it'll just taste much better. So you'll get more flavor, and you can use less cheese. Okay, so we'll grate the cheese. Okay, and we need a nice helping of cheese in this dish. You could also add some meat to this if you wanted to add a little pancetta or a little prosciutto. That would also be nice. Once in a while, though, it's nice to have a meatless meal, so that's what this will be. And then this grater, which is called a mouli, will just go right in your dishwasher. Okay. Okay, so that's done. Okay, grab my couple of stragglers here. All right, I'm gonna put the cheese on top of the spaghetti and the tomatoes. Save some to garnish with, but in the meantime, we're gonna use most of it. Now I'll add my eggs. Just pour them around. We're gonna let this set, and once this sets, I'm gonna put a dinner plate on top of the pan, and what we'll do is we'll turn it over. Okay, so just give this a couple of minutes of cooking time, and then we'll be ready to turn it over. Our frittata has set nicely, so now what I'm gonna do is flip this over, and I'm gonna take a dinner plate, put it on top of my pan. Okay, let's turn the heat off since we have gas. So you put your dinner plate on top of the pan, you flip it over, ah, beautiful, hold your breath, and then you pop it back into the pan, okay? And you let it cook a couple of minutes on the other side, and it's done. So now I can take the rest of my cheese and garnish this a little bit. And we'll let that cheese melt while the other side is cooking. Okay. Great. And now, while this is cooking, the chicken's finishing, I'm gonna check my oven. I'll be right back, and we'll cook some polenta to go with both of these dishes. I'm gonna check on my pork. I think it's done. Okay, the pork is done. It's nice and tender. You check it with a fork. Make sure it's falling apart. Oh, perfect. Alrighty, so now that the pork is done, I know my chicken breast is done because I give it a little touch and it's nice and firm. My frittata should be almost done. I'm gonna make some polenta. Polenta is ground corn, and it's a coarse grind of corn, so it's a really nice starch to serve with a dish that's nice and saucy like the pork or the chicken. Bring some water or chicken stock or any kind of stock to a boil. We want nice big bubbles. And then I'm gonna pour in the polenta as I'm whisking. You wanna keep the water moving so you don't get any lumps. So I have 1 cup of polenta and 2.5 cups of water, okay? So we have nice big bubbles here. I'm gonna start whisking. Pour the polenta through the whisk, okay? And just stir. This is quick cooking polenta, so in about 3 to 5 minutes, it'll thicken up. You do want to keep whisking. Now, I sometimes add cheese to this, but today, for the dishes that I've cooked, I don't really feel like I need cheese in here. But cheese is a nice addition to your polenta, as well as some fresh herbs. It really depends what you're serving it with. I also love this with a sauteed mushroom mixture on top for a meatless meal. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat down because this is really bubbling away. Okay, and I'm going to check on the frittata. So let's cut a nice slice of our frittata. Oops, make sure you cut all the way through. Turn that pan off. Okay, and there we go. So that looks nice. That piece was a little bit small, so let's do another one. Okay, so we have our frittata, and let me get some of this polenta on the plate, and then I'll top the polenta with the pork. Okay, it makes a really nice bed. It'll soak up all the sauce from the pork. And you want to make sure you get some beans in every serving. So there we go. So we have our nice country style pork. All right, so we're going to grab 1 piece of chicken breast. And these are nice big pieces of chicken. So you could either share or just have a very high protein meal. You really don't need anything to go with this if you're gonna have this entire chicken breast. But when you're purchasing the chicken breast, what I like to do is I like to look at a package and sort of calculate in my head. If I can't tell by looking at them, I like to calculate in my head just about how big they are, because you really want your serving to be about 4 ounces. So you count the number of chicken breasts in the package, divide the weight by the number of chicken breasts, and you can find out about how big they are. When you're cooking protein, you sometimes have about 30% shrinkage, so you also want to allow for that. I'm Barbara Seelig-Brown. Thank you so much for joining me today on Stress-Free Cooking. I hope you'll visit me on Facebook, and also all these recipes can be found in my book, Stress-Free Cooking.
Funding for Stress-Free Cooking is brought to you by Cutco. Cutco has been making high-quality products in Olean, New York since 1949. Cutco's straight-edge blades are durable, flexible, and hold a razor-sharp edge. And by Melissa's. Established in 1984, Melissa's World Variety Produce is currently the largest distributor of specialty produce in the United States. You could depend on Melissa's for delivering great quality products in fruits and vegetables.
Enjoy Barbara Seelig-Brown's cookbook as she shows you how to make stress-free dishes in the comfort of your own home. Offer made by Stress-Free Cooking for $19.95.